Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to welcome our host, the Director of the Defense Information Systems Agency and Commander of Joint Force Headquarters Department of Defense Information Networks, Air Force Lieutenant General Robert J. Skinner.
I want to sit down. I'll stop talking.
Okay. You want to talk? You want me to talk? Okay, good morning, everybody. How's everybody doing this morning? So, this is kind of the normal Friday of a conference week. We got the coffees, we got the monsters, and everybody's just trying to get awake early in the morning. But I thank you for the stamina to continue on this. I think today's going to be a great day. As you know, we've used to do the TechNet in the spring, and then forecast the industry in the fall. Because we weren't able to do it last year, we decided, okay, let's bring it all together, and then just hopefully in the spring to be able to do this to where we're back to normal, to where we have TechNet in the spring and then forecast the industry in the fall. We're working with AFCEA to make sure that happens. Here's what I would offer to each and every one of you. This is a time to be bold, right? This is a time where the department and industry need to really up their game when it comes to partnerships. We've seen over the last couple days where we've had, we got the on, we have the data spa, which I see is getting a lot of runtime in the press. And we have a department that is driving the joint warfighting construct. It's driving JADC2, and we need industry's help as we get after that. Cloud is a big part of that. Mobility is a big part of that. You heard General Morrison talk yesterday about how the Army is converging their networks. They're converging their ConOps of how defensive cyber operations and DOD ops are more integrated. Because I will tell you today, the majority of forces when it comes to cyberspace operations is in DOD ops. And the ability to secure the environment, the ability to protect the environment, but just as important, making sure that environment is resilient and available at the time and place of our choosing. That, to me, is where industry really comes into play. How do we make sure that the capabilities that the department desires, needs, at any time is available, protected, and secure? We don't have time. I will tell you that right now. And so as you're thinking about the offerings that you have and working with the department, a couple of things I would ask. First and foremost, is it best value? We have got to get to the best value construct. And that's on both sides, right? This is a partnership. We need to help. Secondly, is it scalable? As you've seen, the Department of Defense breaks things. We love to break technology in some form or fashion. So as you're working with your partners and as you're working with us from a capability standpoint, the one thing I ask is it scalable? Because we need scalable solutions. We need solutions that are interoperable. And as we look to the next 3 to 5 years even, first and foremost is we have a lot of capability already. In fact, I would offer, and those who've heard me speak before have heard, we have too many tools. How do we optimize what we have? Help us optimize what we have first at minimal cost. And why do I say that? Because we need to drive our resources to the future, the network that we want, the IT that we need, not what we have. And so balancing that as a department standpoint is our responsibility from a senior leader standpoint is how do we help balance that? But I need your help to help show us how to balance that. optimize what we have, minimal cost, and then drive to the environment that we know we need for the future environment, whether that's competition all the way to conflict. Hoping we never get to that part, but we've got to be postured and ready. We have a great showcase today, right? We talked about the restructure a little bit. I won't go into that again. We talked about our priorities. Happy if there's questions on that. We have each of our center directors who will be speaking to you today and kind of highlighting within those directors and within those directorates the things that they need to drive the organization forward, but more importantly, the department. And so with that, Doug, I think did I turn it over to you or General Yee? Okay, I'll turn it over to Doug Packard. Unless there's any questions for me before we start the forecast of industry. And again, I first off, thank you for your staying power over the last few days. It's good to be together. It's good to be here with you, and it's good to be partners as we drive things forward. So unless there's any questions, we will turn over to Mr. Packard and get the show on the road. Thank you.
So good morning, how is everyone? So I'm gonna do my best. I'm getting over a pretty severe sinus infection, not COVID, pretty severe sinus infection. So I'll do my best not to clear my throat often. Again, welcome to your forecast. Thanks, General Skinner, for laying the groundwork of what we're gonna talk about today. It has been a great partnership with AFCEA, including us for the third day of the event, so we're very, very thankful for the setup, logistical support, and for the time that they spent on our behalf setting up the forecast for DISA to present to you today. And again, it is very much your forecast. I'll make a few comments in a moment about how to make sure you make the most out of it, program tables, et cetera. So the only question I do have for AFCEA is we had the most beautiful, living in Baltimore, we had the most beautiful 2 days of a TechNet symposium I think we've ever had. You get to Friday morning and my big decision was, can I make it from the parking garage or the bus in here without getting rained on? So I'm not sure what happened, but day 3 seemed to be a little bit drearier weather, and there's local flooding with some of the low-lying areas of the city. So I talked to General Yee about this, and he always has a plan. He always has a plan. Says, sir, it's kind of dreary out. He said, well, everyone will stay inside. No one's going to leave the event. I'm like, oh, that's great. I said, well, what are we going to do to keep things live? Because you come in and it's cloudy and you kind of get kind of mopey. So what General Yee did under your chair, he put for you unlimited amount of cigars, unlimited amount of Pappy's Special Reserve $100 a shot liquor. So that's under all your chairs. So his wife, Maria, who's a real sweetheart, she heard about it. She said, Garrett, everyone doesn't drink that stuff. So she put little tickets for wine under your chair as well. And I don't do wine, so I went to the local Guinness brewery, and you have some stouts and you have some Baltimore blondes under your chairs. So you'll stay occupied, go to the program tables, they'll fill your glass back up. Now, the caveat to all that Joni and I planned when I heard about it was, when you have all those and you have enough and you had 4 or 5 different drinks, let a contracting officer know, because at that point we want to renegotiate your rates and drive them down. And we figured that's the best point to do it. So with General Yee, there's always a method to his madness. So just let one of us know. General Yee will take the refund checks or take the new lower pricing, however you want to provide it. We'll work out fine. Now you did see as you were coming in, and we'll show it a couple more times during the event, you did see our rock stars in PSD. Well, that is a great idea Quentin Rashid had. We'll probably continue that every year we have this. We have some real rock stars. You can't be a fee-for-service organization to provide contracting support and charge a fee for an organization can get it for gratis, organically, and they choose 50% of my business base to come to a DITCO for support. They do that because they had rock stars, and you saw some of them as you came in today, and we'll show that at the lunch period, I think, on some of the breaks. Again, I'm really proud of them. I will call out one. I think we have a lot of our folks over here on the left-hand side. I'm not sure if Michelle Rand is in the audience today. Is she in? Is she not? I don't think she may not be. But you saw her face on the screen. So Michelle Rand won the Elmer Stats Award from the National Contract Management Association, the Procurement Roundtable. Why is that important? Well, one, it is someone who is in the first 10 years of their career, which when I heard that, I'm like, Michelle only has 10 years of experience? I thought she had like 20 or 25. Youthful, but I thought she had a lot more experience. So the award that Michelle Rand won was the 1102 in the United States federal government with less than 10 years experience. Not DOD, not DISA. The entire federal government is the award that Michelle Rand won. That's really a great accomplishment, right? Okay. Not to be outdone, the previous year, Shannon Sanders Ditko Scott won the 1102 Single Federal Employee of the Year in the federal government again. So we're a two-peat. My goal is to make it a three-peat, right? So we're really proud of the folks. That is a smattering of the larger awards. Tons of nominations we submit, but we're really, really proud of part of the team. A lot of folks are on this side over here on the left-hand side. They'll be at the program tables. Please do take the time to meet all of them because they are the rock stars. I just get the benefit of being able to speak of them well. All right, so for today, so not much is different from in the past forecast we've had. I counted up, this is actually the 9th forecast. The 10th I've been at, the 9th I've more or less managed, so it won't be a lot different. So you'll see the standard briefings. There'll be the standard organizational structures, much different because the structure is different this year. It's not like in previous years where you came up and you kind of knew, yeah, we've seen that for 2 years, so we kind of get it. It's different. It's a different structure, as General Skinner had alluded to in his opening remarks. So that'll be good for you to hear. And at the same time, they're going to talk about their strategic focus as executive of DISA and the department, where they see that center adding value. How they see that center connecting in cyberspace and serving the warfighter and the larger department, and in many cases, the federal government. So that'd be an interesting take for you, I believe. So to prepare, a couple things to prepare as you go through, prep for these events. So I mentioned about connect in cyberspace. So strategic plan was issued by General Skinner. If you don't have a copy of this, it is on our website. As I define a strategic plan, the folks I work with is, if you come to the fork in the road, you take it. With strategic plan, you come to the fork in the road, you take the right fork. If you don't read this, you do not know where this is going, and you do not know the focus of what the executives are pushing towards. So read the strategic plan, okay? You will then hear about many more lower-level program portfolios, endpoint, et cetera. Right? JSP will talk about their portfolio. That is at a little bit more tactical level, right? And that will lead into some of the actual acquisition opportunities. That is not all the acquisition opportunities. There are ones that the executive and their teams picked out to talk to you about it. And one, to make sure you're tracking that it's out there. But two, in many cases, there's something intrinsic and something of value, or maybe they're looking for the right solution, or they want to give you a heads up that something's coming. If you need to think about teaming, partnering, joint venture, this is really the time to do so, right? So that's how they pulled these up to you. Again, that part, not much different than previously. Within the same website, we have posted our DISA contract guide. It's on the website, so as you'll hear me speak in my last brief of the day, we talk about DISA Premier contracts, Encore Steady, agency program short BPAs, they're all in this guide. These contracts are set up strategically for DISA's many business partners, mission partners rather, that need contractual support, and it's scaled and tailored towards the needs of that community, right? It's not scaled towards the needs of a transportation company. It's scaled toward the needs of the nation's premier buyer for IT, which is DISA. Okay, so we really do focus on vehicles. So second point, success. If you haven't read through that guide, read through the guide. It's published in Sigma magazine. They do a phenomenal job. So be clear when we talk about the premier vehicles, that's the vehicles that we're going to use. Okay. And then last, the acquisition opportunities has been released. It's 279 line items. It should be generally everything we have above $5 million, a lot of hardware, software that is emerges over time, very repetitive. Those would not necessarily be on the list, but 279 lines of acquisition opportunities, starting with first quarter issue, RFP issued first quarter FY 22, and it goes out to contracts would be issued in the 23-24 time for award. So that has been posted. We do plan on doing that quarterly in the future. We've just not mastered being able to take a huge project and do a lot of AI and do a lot of automation with it. So we're very, very pleased we'll be able to do that on a more frequent basis for you. In the agenda, and I believe on the table, there's a card. You point your camera at it, not your scanner, just your camera, and you'll be able to pull up the agenda. We make some comments as we went for the last couple of years for anyone that's new. So when you brief and you set up 10 to 15 minutes to brief on a slide, by human nature, you're always nervous, you're always quicker than you had planned, right? So if you look at, for example, on the agenda, and the last brief concludes at 9:45 this morning when Jason Martin concludes his CAE briefing. If he gets, and that's supposed to be at 9:45, if he gets done at 9:15 and we go into the break, we will begin after the break at 10 a.m. So after a break, those times are hard. The hard begins, right? If we get done early with different briefings, we get done early, that means instead of having 20 minutes to go to a program table, you have 25 minutes, you have an hour, right? So in previous years, the program tables have been where the magic is occurring, what folks like to see and do. So do not feel cheated if you think, well, they got done before 9:45, I missed something. You missed nothing, right? You really did not. But so at the program tables, network, use that time to your advantage, okay? Where are the program tables? Okay, I live here and I don't know where Howard Street is, okay? Where are the program tables? Where you register, it's to the right, okay? All those program tables will be out there. I believe they open up at 9:30, so you'll be able certainly to see those. For the opportunities, if you haven't pulled up the list yet, for the procurement acquisition opportunities, if you go to the DISA.mil, news/events, and you pull up the forecast industry, the new opportunity should be in that acquisition forecast for, it might say FY21, it may say FY22. So go there for your opportunities, take a look. Those will be very helpful as you engage with your program tables. So those are my very brief opening comments. General Yee is going to lead with myself and Jason Martin, Fireside Chat. And I told Jason Martin, I said, hey, I get to have an event with my two favorite people in acquisition in the entire agency. And Jason said, oh, I think you only have two friends in the agency at all. It's not just acquisitions. I'm like, okay. So at least he's my stage man. So with that, I'll turn this over to General Yee for continue forward.
Yeah, well, good morning, everyone, and let's get situated. I'll sit at the end. Why don't you sit in the middle, Jason?
Okay.
All right. Well, it's good to be back.
Oh.
Yeah, I'm just kind of glad that, Fred Henry and Dave Mihalsic made it in this morning. I know for day 3, as General Skinner was saying, it shows some sustainment power here. And as I was walking around earlier, looking into your eyes, clear-eyed, I can tell, every one of you. So thanks for staying with us for day 3. I'm going to say a few things about FY21, and then we'll do some questions and answers. The roles that we have here, I'm the Senior Procurement Executive. Doug is the Head of Contracting Activity, and Jason is our Component Acquisition Executive. So three of the key positions in the procurement and acquisition world at DISA that we have different roles, and I think sometimes we're not quite sure what those are if you're not talking amongst us. And so we may explore a bit about that. But before we dive into that, just a couple months ago, we had the largest airlift in U.S. history. We planned for 60 to 70,000 evacuees, and when General Milley testified to Congress about that, he said, we actually ended up evacuating over 120,000 evacuees out of Kabul. Amazing. And at the peak of that NEO operation, there was a sortie every 45 minutes flying out of Kabul, airlifting passengers out of there. Never missed a sortie. Incredible. And that just goes to show you the power of industry and military working together to make that happen, because we couldn't do it all, whether by ourselves in the military, without the support of a lot of stuff happening behind the scenes over the years to get to that point. Now, military capability is probably going to be a little more expensive at times because we need that robust capability, but it still needs to be optimized, right? As General Skinner said. DISA and some of our industry partners in this room today also had a direct role in that NEO operation, and that was to keep the network up until the very last sortie left Kabul. No kidding. And it was quite an operation, behind the scenes, and at the last moment, remotely turned off and demilled that router that kept that communication up and running up to the last sortie. Incredible. Stories you don't hear about. It's the kind of stuff that we do in this room, which is very much behind the scenes to get stuff done. And so that just shows you the power of working together. Now, fast forward a couple of weeks, my wife was trying to fly back from California. There was a problem in Florida, and she couldn't get out here because there was a jam, in the flight schedules for Southwest Airlines, right? That held up traffic for 3 days before she came out of California to come to the East Coast, right? That's an example when it's not going to work. And so we need the kind of resilient capability that the example of the airlift out of Afghanistan, showed us all. So just an example. In FY21, a couple big numbers, and we'll wrap them up again later on, but $5.7 billion in obligated funds through DITCO, over 6,000 contract awards this past year, and over 57,000 contract actions through DITCO, Scott, and all of our DITCOs. An incredible amount of work done by the team. Just to give you an idea of the scale of the stuff that we do here at DISA. So with that, we're going to jump into a couple roles, definitions first, and then we'll go into some questions I think are good for all of us to kind of address and readdress, because these are not new questions in some cases. So first of all, as the Senior Procurement Executive, my role is at a higher level to ensure that from a procurement standpoint, that we are headed in the right direction, and there are certain legal responsibilities that I have, which is to review all the contract, all of the acquisition plans and strategies over $93.5 million. Those come through me. I sign all the bridges, and I also do the ratifications. So functionally, those are the things that I do. But more than that, it's more about trying to ensure that the direction that DISA is going is in alignment with the director's focus and vision. And so as Doug said earlier, we have a strategic plan. We all need to read that. It's an easy read. It's not shelfware. It's like maybe 3 pages of real good content in terms of the actual 5 lines of effort. And if you can get through that, then I think we'll all be in a better place. And so that's my role. I'm going to kick it over to Doug as the HCA, and then over to Jason.
Well, again, good morning. So I am the DISA Head of Conduct and Activity. I have been at DISA for, it'll be 10 years in April of 2022, so it's been quite a while. I've been the Director of Procurement and the HCA for about 8.5 years now, almost going on 9. So I have an entry position, so I report to the boss, General Skinner. My boss of record is Mr. Barnhurst. My taskmaster is General Yee. So I really kind of answered all 3, which is good. So I started in DISA on 12 April, Easter Sunday, 12 April 2012. So for my faith, that was a good omen, and it's been a good omen. What do I do day to day? Again, I work with a phenomenal group of folks that allow me to be their leader. We write policy for how we do procurement. As I tell many folks, I don't make, with one exception, I've yet to make one law for the federal government or the Department of Defense. My job is to make the laws and rules for my national leaders or from our department easier and most agile I can for the workforce. I think we do that collectively well when such a large part of my business base is non-DISA mission partners. There's a lot of regulatory authorities I have. Maybe the biggest misconception is that I actually have a contract officer's warrant. I do not, and it's rare that I intercede with the contract officers day-to-day work in their day-to-day business. So thank you, sir.
Thanks, Doug. Jason.
All right, good morning, everybody. Jason Martin. I've been with DISA now for 20 years. I'm wrapping up my 20th year. All the white hair is from working here at DISA. But I spent the first 8 years out in Denver as a contractor working with the DECs, or the DISA data centers. So I learned a lot about data center infrastructure, and then the applications that rode on top of those hosting environments. So that's really kind of formed the basis of my knowledge of the agency. And then in 2009, I became a civil servant, worked in the what is now the Mission Partner Engagement Office, which taught me the other side. It taught me really what DISA's primary functions were, which are vast, as you know, but that's really given me a great foundation to really look at everything from tip to tail. So one of the things I wanted to talk about, General Yee, is I've noticed something over the past few months since I became CAE. We have a different language in industry. So I assume there's a few PMPs out in the crowd. So I myself got my PMP before I came into the government. And when I came in, then I got my GAU Level 3 PM certification, which has qualified me to be the CAE. They're the same thing. So what I find interesting, and what I heard actually quite a few times this week was acquisition, acquisition, acquisition. And every time that folks had acquisition, they were talking about Mr. Packard and procurement. So just to baseline everybody moving forward, so when you engage with me as the CAE or as the center director and the other center directors, think acquisition is tip to tail program management. Okay, so obviously we acquire and we procure services, software, hardware, et cetera, to accomplish our overall mission. But when we're talking about acquisition, we're really talking about program management. So my role on a day-to-day basis is to work with the program managers across the entire agency to ensure they have what they need. If they don't have what they need, then I work with senior leadership across the agency to help them get there. So think cost, schedule, performance for the entirety of a program and the program lifecycle, which is exactly what we're tasked to do in the CAE shop. So what that includes, to Doug's point, is more policy, it's governance. We work across the agency to ensure we get necessary documentation in place. You will hear me, and during my panel yesterday, we talked a lot about requirements. Everything starts with the requirement. So I've probably said, what are your requirements more than in the past year than I've said in my entire life. But it is so critical to helping us really get to those contracts and delivering the capability that we've been asked to deliver across the board. So again, from tip to tail, managing those requirements and making sure we're delivering against those.
That's a good point. And something that Doug brought up about not having a warrant. None of us do on the stage, and so the idea there is, you can talk to us, but we can't influence the outcome of a contract award. We can't. We're insulated by that, by a couple of levels and layers, for good reason, and I'm thankful for that. So let's talk about the shark closest to the boat, or whatever you want to call it. Doug, you said something about the dog closest to the car. COVID-19. Please explain the new COVID-19 clause.
Oh, I thought your first question was supposed to be a softball question. I'm defer to my other two bosses here. Wasn't he supposed to give me a softball question first? So COVID-19. So it is the shark closest to the boat, I think, at this point for most of us. In the kind of community, so Executive Order 14042, ensuring COVID-19 safety protocols for federal contractors, was issued. It was issued in large part based on work done by the Safer Workforce Task Force with the federal government aligned under OMB. So under that guise and under the executive order, the Department of Defense issued a clause. They call it a deviation. It's a deviation because the federal government will in fact issue their clause for the federal government, but it requires contractors at the end of the day to have their personnel vaccinated by 8 December for a covered contract. You have to go into all the details to read it to make sure you understand contractually, legally, what is binding on you. It is a covered contract. For example, you're above the simplified acquisition threshold. It doesn't apply to a contract that's $10,000 that DISA will not put in the contract, right? So you have to be a covered contract. And there is a tail to this clause that says something to the effect of similarly situated employees. Your employees that are direct labor on the contract, clearly those are in that vein for vaccination. Well, the tail of that contract is folks that are similarly situated in a building. For example, general counsel, logistics, et cetera, in a building for a company that has a number of DOD or government contracts. Or let's just leave it at DOD or DISA. Okay, so those similarly situated individuals, to create that building is safe, the clause applies down to those similarly situated individuals in your company. So again, it's covered contracts. You need to read through and get the right mantra. So the requirement is from the executive order, aligned to the task force, is for the contract employees to be vaccinated by 8 December. Please take a look at the clause. There is that open letter to contractors that we've issued on the DISA website. But that is the crux of what the COVID clause requires. I would tell you it is one of those self-certify. If you look in Section K, when you submit a proposal, you intend that you're going to do blank. When you perform a contract under many clauses, you're going to do blank. It is when you're awarded a contract at 8 December, it is presumed that contractors are vaccinated in accordance with the executive order and in accordance with the instructions from the administration. So it is more of a self-certified. When you perform, you're telling us that you are in fact in compliance with the clause after 8 December.
So just a nuance here. What about requirements coming into a DISA facility, which many contract workforce members come into each day?
Right. So the clause is unique. The clause applies to a contractual relationship. That is not the same as access to a department or a DISA facility. Facility access is not under that clause. It is purposely not under that clause. So a DISA commander, a DISA director, a DISA commander, Joint Force Headquarters DODN, has the authority, as is any commander or director, to control the space that they command and control as a director or commander, right? So within that scheme, under the Workforce Services Directorate, Service Development Directorate within DISA, there will be facility access controls in place, right? There'll be a DD 3150, which a contractor will say, I have been vaccinated. To enter a DISA facility, not under the clause, but to enter the DISA facility, that form will need to be on person and showed to the government representative, DISA representative at the door. It could be security, it could be any number of individuals, depending on how small the space may be. That will be provided to have access to the facility, right? If you have one contract with DISA and you need to come to the building and it's not a covered contract because it's maybe $100,000, you shall have the 3150 to access the facility. Facility access is not the clause. So they'll enforce that at the entry points. There's anomalies about the testing that's being worked out of who's providing the test kits, how they provided, how long will the will tests be valid for. So some of that's being worked with Mr. Rears right now, and that'll be issued out. As soon as we have it finalized, probably in the next week, maybe the week after, we'll post it on that same DISA website so you're aware of it. But the clause is not facility access. I think that's the primary point, General, that I would like to make.
Well, thanks, Doug. So enough of the COVID discussion here. Something more interesting, I think, is the day at the spa that General Skinner talked about, or 2 days ago actually now, and how we're going to do that, how we're going to get through that. And zero-based review is something that's not new to the department or any organization. Sometimes it's difficult to actually execute that. What you've already seen is the sunsetting of some capabilities that have been around for a while. And so we've actually been in a process of reviewing existing capabilities for some time. And so when the boss said, hey, we want to do a zero-based review, well, there was already a process in place and an effort in place that enabled that to be executed. And Jason, in his role as a CAE, well, just tell us, Jason, what were you doing about that? How are you going to do this, Jason?
Well, we've actually already started it. So yesterday we got a question about, give us a timeline. So the timeline the director gave us to run the ZBR, or the day at the spa, for all 130 programs has started now, and we will use all the data that we gather, review, validate for the POM 24 planning. So for all of you that are anxiously already awaiting kind of our plans in 24, we will have that together, and it will be built on what we found out through the SPA process. So when Director Skinner came in, one of the first things he asked me to do was give him program reviews, of course. So we set up a weekly battle rhythm to brief him and all the seniors on all the programs. So we've gone through, I think, about 80 programs so far is what we've seen. And we've got through a lot of the big ticket items and some of the ones that are really cross-cutting across the agency and enabling other capabilities, et cetera. And it was about 2 or 3 months ago, we had a very big program laydown, and he looked at me and he said, Jason, I don't understand the building blocks here. How are you guys tracking that? And I said, well, sir, that's a great question, because everybody does it differently, and the answer is always, it depends. Right? So, of course, when you say that to a 3-star, they're going to look at you and say, okay, please explain that. So what we've done is actually Ms. Barb Crawford and I are co-leading the effort. Obviously, as the comptroller, she has a significant vote in what we do and helping us get the funding necessary to deliver these capabilities. But what we've done is we've rolled out 2 pilot programs. So they owe me charts on Wednesday. And then what we'll do is we'll get together as a group of seniors, we'll look at the data, we'll find out what we're missing, what we're not, and then what we find, and then we'll go brief General Skinner. And assuming that is what he needs to see to help us provide strategic direction, the seniors will then say, okay, here's what we believe we need to do to start looking across the board. We'll go through all 130 programs. So essentially it starts next week. And what I'm in the process of doing now is looking at the big ticket items, talking to my peers on what we think would provide the biggest bang or the best value to begin with, and then we'll go on through there. But this will all be wrapped up by the spring, General Yee.
I'll just say that it was a bit of a cultural shift when the boss came in and said, I want to start doing some program reviews. There's a lot of good stuff happening out there. There's a lot of opportunity, to optimize. But it was so important for us to be able to find where we have some trade space to be able to move forward in the current and the next year before we get into the POM. As the director mentioned a couple days ago about, where do we start, when do we start this? Well, it's 24 now, but 22 and 23, we're looking for trade space. And this is the vehicle and the process that we're using to get after that. And so it's been an adjustment to the staff. Pace has picked up a bit. When you do one every week, that's a pretty hefty clip with everything else that's going on, but it's caused a focus more so on those programs in a good way. A couple years ago, Doug, a big splash about the Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification, CMMC, and then it got quiet. Right. So where are we with CMMC?
Well, so let me tell you where I'm able to know where we're at. Within the department, acquisition sustainment, industrial policy sets the parameters and the policy for the CMMC. So there's been a lot of comments from small businesses on cost and large businesses based on what is this and what are these protocols, and this is a lot of time and effort. And oh, by the way, irrespective of business size, I'm paying someone to do an audit of me? And it's something, didn't I tell you before, department, that I'm doing all that stuff? Well, maybe you were, maybe you weren't, right? So based on all the comments and change administrations, industrial policy is leading a review of the CMC process. It's been about a 6-month process they've been through the review. I understand, no one's called me and said, Doug, what do you think? And I get most of my news from the press candidly and some through the department contracted officials. But in a review, I don't know how it will turn out, but it should be by the end of the year. We'll have some type of methodology. Now, we had a mission partner with it that the DITCO supports that wanted to be one of the 5 pilots within the department. It went between 5 and 7, some added, some dropped out, but let's just say there was 5 pilots. And there's a working group to talk about how to issue the RFP and what the gating criteria would be, if there are any, and what are the evaluation metrics that would be used for evaluation of CMMC in an RFP. It's like the pilot test. The process went along for several months, and then it's arguably whether there was a pause or whatever strategic word you want to use, but the working group ceased for several months. They had a working group meeting here in October. It was about CUI, controlled unclassified information, which is not CMC. So in my mind, it's still in a pause to figure out how the department wants to go forward. But I think the good part, General Yee, is when you say you want to have a voice in how processes and how policies work in the department, and certainly within DISA, we do it well. But industry expressed concerns, and the department responded with, "Let us take a look at it." So I think it's been a very good process that we're able to question what's going to occur. My gut feel on the issue, you can quickly say I'm jaded, because I work for an organization as General Skinner has mentioned, FCA TechNet this morning. We connect and protect, right? So in my mind, with that as my logic, and with the Congress looking at cybersecurity and cyber warfare, I don't see how it's possible to take this animal called cybersecurity, put it to the side and figure, well, we'll just continue to self-certify. To me, and again, someone could quickly say in the department, you're jaded because you're too close to the fight, is the cyber battle today is no different. We don't have a name for it yet. They'll name it a year or two from now. This is no different than the Maginot Line in World War I or the Battle of the Bulge in World War II. It is a fight every single day, and that DISA building, the DISA commands, protecting that cyber. So do I think it will just magically go away and do some type of self-certification? I personally do not think it will go that route. I think there'll be some level of a review process. What it would be, well above my pay grade, but my candid thought is it won't just go away. It won't go away with a department that needs to be connected and protected in cyberspace. So it's a great question.
Yeah. No, it hasn't gone away completely. There's a pilot underway, and so we'll learn from that pilot as well. But the underlying premise also ties into supply chain risk management on software, on procurements, on personnel. So absolutely a critical concept. It's a matter of how we execute that. So back over to Jason. Big splash over the last 2 days on Thunderdome and the zero trust, concept. How are we going to do that? From a, acquisition standpoint, what's the plan?
I think that's your softball question, Jason.
That's a great question. I was talking to a few folks. Being here 20 years, I've seen a lot of things happen well, happen not so well, get through things, expediently. This one's going to be tough, generally. So we're taking a little different approach with Thunderdome, which I think is actually going to pay big dividends early. First off, the senior team that worked together with some key team members has been incredible. So we launched, I think within a couple months, we had a pretty well-baked idea and a very well coordinated across the department vision of what we wanted to do. And it's been everyone across senior leadership. So we talk about this every week. So back to the point about periodic reviews, we have a very senior level meeting every Tuesday to talk about where we're going. So the first part of the plan is, how do we build our cross-functional teams? So we have built quite a few cross-functional teams from every single organization in the agency to make sure everybody is up to speed on our vision, the strategy, where we need to go, and what we need from them. So that's already started. What they're doing now is building out the long-term or the short, mid, and long-term plans for what we need, when we need it, how we're going to get there, and when we'll be done on any given aspect of the program. And as we talked about, remember, we're talking essentially about every layer of the network, everything. We're fundamentally changing how we do business and how we operate the DISN. So it's critical that communication is in place. So as I think everybody likely knows, we're using OTA to start, and we're going through that right now, so I won't get into details on that. But we've seen great success with some other OTAs, and I think, again, as I mentioned one of our sessions yesterday, DISA is really evolving. DISA is using new techniques. DISA is doing things to try to become quicker at delivery, to the point about velocity in our strategic vision. How do we get there? And that's exactly what we're doing, is leveraging these different more agile ways of thinking and doing that across the board with experts that are on loan to us for a day or two or permanent. But I will say this program is going to be fundamentally different because of how we're staffing it. When you impact the entire DISN and when you need resources from across the entire agency, you have to think differently. That's exactly what we've done through these cross-functional teams.
Yeah. As you were talking, Jason, I was just thinking about how, for Thunderdome, it touches on what we're doing at the perimeter, what we're doing at the mid-tier, which is our JRSS stacks, and then to some extent, the endpoint. And how, as I described to folks, we had a network-based architecture that was supported by a network-based cybersecurity architecture or framework, right? And it's no longer that way. It's no longer a network-based, it's no longer a network-centric architecture with the cloud. The DODN reaches out to beyond the old perimeter through the IAPs, and so what we're doing is we're evolving the cybersecurity architecture to an evolving network architecture, which means that for Thunderdome, catchy title, it impacts the perimeter, the mid-tier, the endpoint. And so these program reviews that we're doing day at the spa is so important because now everything we're looking at as we go through that is through the lens of does this move us forward towards zero trust or not, right? And that's what's happening. So, big moves of money over time, but we'll see some in the next 2 years. And, kudos to Chris Barnhurst, our Executive Deputy Director, who really helped to champion that early to get that in front of General Skinner, who said, step on the gas. And in maybe a different life, it might have been a good idea, let's work on that. And 2 years later, we have a concept. And 2 years later, we try to program for it. No, we had limited time to get it in the 24. So we hustled, and to Chris Barnhurst, with his leadership and engagement with OSD, it's happening.
So General, could I add on to that?
Absolutely.
Too? So absolutely, Mr. Barnhurst was the driver from day one. And what also has been really interesting, if you think about, Mr. Barnhurst is our new Executive Deputy Director, but also, you'll see today, and we've talked about, there's a lot of change in the agency. There's also a lot of senior leadership change in the agency. Every single senior from day one heard, this is the direction we're going to go, and they hopped on the train. And we have worked this as I mentioned, a collective senior-led effort across the agency, absolutely critical, and with support from Mr. Barnhurst, OSD, and across the department. I've seen nothing but real teamwork across the board to make sure that we launch this the right way.
Yeah, and as I said 2 days ago at our little fireside chat with Mr. Barnhurst, the Thunderdome effort is a zero trust way ahead for not only DISA but the department. So when Rob Parker gets up there, General Parker gets up there and says, hey, JADC2, and here are the MVPs, one of them's zero trust, one of them's data, one of them's network. Well, this is the zero trust piece of JADC2. So 100% in alignment with the joint staff. So, back to Doug. Maybe not as exciting, but it's always something that comes up. What is the selection criteria? What goes into a decision when it's decided, it's a best value trade-off versus LPTA? It comes up every year. So every year you get to answer it, Doug.
It does. So at a very fundamental base, if a required activity program manager can define what their needs are, and there's no need to trade off performance for price, it lends itself to an LPTA. So there's many blended things that go into a best trade-off analysis, which basically means I am prepared to pay more for a greater level of performance. The first thing you gotta have is a budget to do it with. The second thing, you have to determine what distinguishes company A from company Z, and can you define it, and can you define the qualitative and quantitative merit of that and make a best value determination. It sounds easy. It is not easy in practice. If the government is able to determine I need to have blank telecommunication circuit and I need this bandwidth and it has to work for me 99.9% of the time, there is no trade space. You might want some, but there is no trade space for a program manager to tell me, what are you going to trade? We're going to trade if it's delivered on time. Delivery set. Why would I pay $1 million for quicker delivery? If you need quicker delivery, define that as your delivery date, right? So it's multidimensional. It is very much collaborative. But I think generally, and we talk about this a lot when things come up on the acquisition plans you see and the J&As that you will see, is what is the trade space? What would the value be? And do you have the budget in a budget climbing or budget neutral environment to pay for that additional service? And oh, by the way, For the next 5 years, given a base and see there's base 4 options, I'm going to ask the program manager, show me you got the value. Your value was we needed experts. And an award is made, and the expert is someone that has a credential. They've had it for 10 years. 1 year into it, contractor, you do not get to substitute that 10-year experienced person with a journeyman level that has 1 year of experience. Because I paid you $1 million to have more. And those quandaries always come up in performance. If you promise it, I absolutely 100% expect as a taxpayer and in my role as the HCA that that is delivered to the program manager. Because the program manager turns to a Mr. Barnhurst, a General Yee, a General Skinner and says, we are successful cost of blank and I paid them more to deliver that effects to this department. If we can't say that, the best value isn't always the right answer for the procurement. But again, it's a multidimensional question. It goes to everything we buy. There's some level of discussion. Sometimes it's a much level discussion. Jason's involved, General Yee's involved, but it comes up, as you mentioned, comes up every year. There's no one finite answer, but that's some of the things that we go through when we discuss it within DISA. Thanks, it's a great question.
Thanks, Doug. It comes up every year. It actually comes up throughout the year.
Yep.
So kind of building off of the Thunderdome / OTA discussion. Maybe I'm going to put Jason on the spot here a little bit. OTAs aren't new, but they allow us to do things in a more agile development, process, right? And that's kind of the idea. But then how do you measure, performance? How do you know if, as you're progressing, whether or not, because it's not a contract, and the contract is going to say, deliver 10 widgets by a certain day at a certain price. And either you did it or you didn't did it, right? But an OTA is not like that. So, what are some of the lessons learned, maybe, Jason?
We have a few. I think I have about 20 more minutes, so I'll just take up the time to talk about that. But as Doug, I think you made some really good points. I, of course, was asked about LPTA, and on the panel yesterday, you said, please do best value. Easier said than done. Right? And OTAs are another thing, easier said than done. DISA for years, and I think back to the initial capacity services contracts when Tony Purvis and I and a team worked through those. How did we want to do it? And it took us years to kind of refine and make those better so that we're operating efficiently as we are today. I think with OTAs, you'll see the same thing. So again, I'll go back to initially, what are the requirements? So with Thunderdome, for example, Angie and I and Dr. Herman and a few other folks have had a lot of discussions about what are the requirements and are we making sure we're laying those out appropriately. When we allow for these very wide open type contracts, thought-provoking, industry best practice concepts, how do you bound that? And I think that's something that we've, to be totally honest with, been challenged with, of course. When you go with something that's really large versus very small, you're going to potentially miss a couple things. And if you're not explicit or you really don't think through the second, third order effects of what you're putting on paper, that'll get you in trouble. So I think the first lesson learned really for us has been, what are the requirements? Have we really thought through, and have we thought about the impact on the DODN, not just the DISN, with the requirements, right? The other thing I would say is communication. So whether it's a contract that we have today versus we've worked through any number of contracting vehicles, with an OTA, it's the same thing. Are we communicating? Is the government communicating expectations? Is our industry partner communicating their expectations? Are we delivering on what we said we would deliver? Did we agree on what we would deliver? And what I found out through negotiations over the past few years is we could do better. So I'm going to bring in, I'm going to go back to COVID for a second. By show of hands, how many of you have been in the DISA building in the past year and a half? More than I expected. So that's really good news. We are open for business. Oh, General Skinner is there all the time. That's really good news. Because as I think you all know and as we know, things aren't really optimal when you don't see each other for a year and a half. I've had countless requests from folks in the room here to say, hey, let's get together in person. And I will tell you, whether it was in here or at socials in the evenings, people are elated to get back together in person. So I think that's critical as we do OTAs or any contracting activity, is for us to really be able to look each other in the eyes and say, here's my expectation. Do you understand? Do I understand your expectations? And making sure we really document, work through that, and understand what we're supposed to deliver.
Hey, Jim, one of my shameless plugs. So we do have Vanessa McCullum, who is our lead for OTAs for Ditko Scott. Tina Villas is here in the audience. He'll be at a program table. I believe Craig Carlton came. So one of my primary phone of friends is Evelyn De Palma, who was me about 10, 12 years ago. She's going to call when I say, what's going on? What do you want to know? How can I help? And she's phenomenal. She is truly my phone a friend. And one of her questions was, we don't quite know, we quite understand the OTAs. Could you talk about it? Vanessa's going to briefly this afternoon. What are they? What are ones we've done? Maybe some lessons learned. But she and her team will be at a program table. So please, Howard Street again that way in the building by registration. And she'll be glad to talk with you any more detail, stressing the points that Jason Martin made. But any other question you have, she and her team will be available to answer them. So thanks, sir.
You know, I had a chuckle to myself when you said, you know, how many folks were in the disability in the last year, or whatever you said, and all these hands went up. I think those are the ones that were like paying attention. So thanks for paying attention. There's a lot going on. And maybe just to kind of, you know, maybe reinforce the importance of communication. And we will get through this, but, you know, face-to-face communication is important, right? And our doors are open. And we are open to, you know, in-person meetings. The director has had several in-person meetings. But I'll say, though, that if you want to get a meeting with the director, it really needs to be at the CEO level. Below that might be myself or Jason or Doug. But our doors are open for in-person meetings. And back to what you said about, you know, looking, you know, eye to eye to make sure we're on the same page. It's so important. And so now, that doesn't mean that everyone that asks for a meeting gets a meeting with the person that you want to meet with, right? If you're a small business, you're probably going to go through Carlene Campanos first to make sure that you understand how to work with DISA, which is a very large, complex organization. And she has a, you know, like little small business 101 session that she can take you through virtually. So our doors are open, though. And I think today's event and the last 2 days are a good example of, you know, our genuine, intent to engage. And in fact, when I looked at a lot of the slides, the briefings over the last couple of days, I thought, oh my goodness, man, you know, we're telling, you know, we give that stuff to our, you know, our government mission partners, you know, and so we're throwing it out there. No difference. The briefings that you saw over the last 2 days are the same briefings that we give to the Department of the Air Force, the Army, the Navy, Marine Corps, et cetera, Space Force, Coast Guard as well. And so what you saw the last 2 days was unfiltered. Here's what we're doing, and here's what we're trying to get across. So we are committed to that. Maybe something not as exciting, but oftentimes does create a little bit of consternation, Doug, is sole source contracting. And there are a number of criteria that we go through, and I have to sign off on the large J&A's justification and analysis. But Doug, tell us, you know, from a head of contracting activity, your thoughts on that.
Right. Okay. Well, let me just, before I do that, let me make a quick note for, General, you mentioned that the DISA 101 small business that Carlin gives. I can tell you, when folks call me, large business, I ask them, have you been to it? It is a phenomenal way, regardless of business size. If you're a large business, you have a subcontracting plan, Carlin will call you and ask you, what are you doing and why haven't you met these? So Carlin's good to know regardless of business size. She's a really, and I know General Yee and I both will say, go to Carlin's DISA 101 and then call me if you have questions after, regardless of business size. Sole source. So, you know, as an individual, I kind of get, I do truly get a program manager perspective. I use my colleagues for an example. So you have a car. Think about your own personal car. General Yee can't because he has a Tesla and he never takes it in, right? But my colleague Jason here, if you haven't seen his Denali, this is like MTV, this is my crib and here's my ride. He has got chrome tires. There is not a scratch on that Denali. I was like, what the heck when I saw him in the parking lot the other day? I'm like, who is this? Who is this executive? Man, that thing is loaded. So you have a car and you're a program manager. So you go for the last 4 years, your car needs repair, you take it to your car repair shop. You love them, they're great. You go back to them, you go back to them, you go back to them. You go back to them for the next 4 years. You go back to them with your new car, right? So you drop your car off for the repair that it needed because it's not a Tesla. You drop it off, program manager, you come into work, or you come in to go back to your virtual home office. And lo and behold, someone on the staff will say, we have this contract that's expiring. Oh, great, incumbent has done a phenomenal job. Well, great, I'm glad they have. I'm glad their CPARS is exceptional. That's very competitive for them in a recompete, right? But unlike your car repair shop for your personal vehicle, is not the federal statutes for how we compete requirements. Irrespective of how exceptional that is, the performance is, that effort, if it's a competitive base, it will be competed. Make no mistake, it will be competed. We do market research to figure out where there is no other substantive supply, service, regardless, no other substantive supplier. Generally, you will always ask, well, Doug, contracting officer, program manager, when he goes to sign off on these is, well, what did you see their capabilities? There really was none. He'll go into, okay, tell me what they said. Tell me what their names were. Tell me how many numbers they have. It's on the paper here, but just talk to me about that. So he takes it very, very seriously. But so use either source of salt, which you do. Use the request for information to respond and to respond thoroughly. That's how we know that there's a competitive market base. There are times where we'll have a J&A, we'll put it out, we'll have industry concerns with it, we'll have dialogue, and there are times where we will reverse and not have it, and we'll make it competitive space. Again, I think that is the capital marketplace in the federal government ecosystem working, where you can object and say, no, we think we can do this and let us show you how. And we have, in fact, it's not a lot because we do a lot of market research up front, a lot of engagement with Carlin and her team to make sure we have that right before we post it. But if we don't, and if something needs to change, as you know, every once in a while, some will change and we'll revert back from either just maybe a sole source to a number of limited sources that can compete. So, but it does come up quite a bit. But there's only a few foundations I think in contracting that is ethical, that small businesses shall participate to the greatest extent they can, and that procurements shall be competitive. And that's the bedrock. That's the foundation of what I've done for 33 years, and it's just not going to change. So it's a great question. It does come up quite a bit, but again, so it's a great question. And I guess the moral of the story is, if you don't want to go to the car repair shop, get a Tesla, right? There you go.
There you go. There you go. That's how you tie it into cars. Yeah, I would say that we do get challenged a lot legally. We do get protests, pre-award protests, post-award protests, protest on the RFI. And we have a very good track record, right? We are good at contracting. We have over 500 professionals, around the world, literally. DITCO Scott is our big one, but we have capability in NCR, Europe, Southwest Asia, and the Pacific to be able to help. And so we're good at it. The Army pays us over $1 billion in work to do contracting for the Army. The Army has a contracting command, they can do their own stuff. But they do come to us because we're good at the IT cyber area. And that kind of expertise is not easy to come by in the contracting world. We're good at space. We're good at ComSatcom. We're good at military SATCOM. We're good at, all that stuff that is very specialized contracting spectrum. So I feel very good about how we would. So that's why we're thorough, and that's why it's hard to get a sole source. We've done some innovation things over the past year and a half to help speed that process through. So let's wrap it up a little bit here, and maybe some closing thoughts from Jason, then Doug.
Well, my first closing thought is I think Doug just gave away some PII on you and I, so we need to relook this. So I'm going to talk here in a minute with my CAE hat on, but I want to go back. I think what I want to foot stomp is we really need to make sure that we are understanding one another. So whether it's requirements discussions, open and honest feedback, and really setting those expectations and marching toward those together. What I don't like is, and what none of us like is to be surprised. And what I still find is, we at all levels are surprised. Let's make sure we're developing a cordial, open and honest and friendly relationship so we don't get to that point. By the time senior leaders get involved, it's not pretty, right? And what I always say is I don't need help from the boss, nor do I want help from the boss, right? I think everybody says that up and down the chain. Because it just complicates things. So let's make sure that we're working together, developing those relationships up front, and really understanding what each other needs to be successful.
Fair enough. Doug.
Well, thanks, sir. So, as I noted in my opening comments, so I get to work with 500 some plus rock stars. You saw just a few of them. It is really an honor to work with them day in and day out. To call them and say, I don't know about blank, what do you think? And typically it's, boss, we've already solved it. Here's the answer, and we go forward. So really, it really has been enjoyable. It's been enjoyable most days, 10 years running at DISA, but it has been fun. Agency has been incredibly good to me personally and professionally. It is what we do. What we do is not easy. If it was easy, I'd be GS-14 and the KOs would be 5s. They're not, because what we do is hard. What you do is hard. But to Jason's point, we have to make it. We have to make it mesh. We have to be able to have firm but candid, but acrimonious decisions. I don't buy anything I buy. Any decision I make is never personal for me. It's never pejorative against the individual or an institution. But there is someone who defends my way of life. That depends on me to do it. And I'm gonna do that to the best that I can until the day I retire and then the days after. But if I could in the closing minutes, so this is General Yee's last event, last forecast industry as to speak. It's been a lot of fun. If you ever look on his desk when he does his VTCs, he has a little coffee mug, it says world's best boss. At first I thought, did he buy that for himself and put it on his desk? Did he? But no, having worked with him, he didn't buy the mug himself. Many people probably gave him that same mug over many years, but it's a lot of fun. We talk several times a week about stuff, about good stuff, bad stuff, what's going on, what do you think about. So with that, Joni, I really think it's important in the last couple of minutes that you give any perspectives you have. You've done a phenomenal job. You've kept me and the colleagues I work with, and the Jason Martins of the world, you've kept us honest in a good way. So, sir, really, any closing thoughts on your work purely as SBE?
Well, thanks, Doug. And I guess I would say, what I've observed, I guess, over the past, 2.5 years, I've seen a lot of synergy amongst the three of us in terms of our roles, right? You as a head of contracting activity, Jason as a component acquisition executive, and then in my role as a senior procurement executive. And if the three of us are working together as a team, then the organization operates much more efficiently and optimally. As Jason runs his program reviews for the boss, we are in alignment. We are able to be in easy alignment with the direction of the organization and support those priorities. So it's very much important that, at our level, that we have a strong bond amongst the three of these positions or persons. And we've already seen that that ability to pivot. So when General Skinner comes on board, hey, here's where we're going, that's where we're going. That transition to a new focus was seamless. A little rough on the first few briefings to the director, I'd say. A little cultural adjustment.
The first one was rough. It was really rough.
But the three of us, because we're in alignment, it's easy to execute. So because of that, I have all of the confidence that, that with his, direction that we will execute. When he was asked 2 days ago, any obstacles, I couldn't think of any obstacle myself. Typically it's, well, if I had the money. No, because, Barb Crawford as our CFO is going to help work with us, and, as we sunset programs, move money around to make room for the priorities. So I saw no obstacles, and I would know that if you look 5 years from now, each of those 5 items of effort beyond the time that General Skinner is here will have made significant progress beyond. Some things last only the duration of a director. These 5 will have, lasting value because we're moving stuff in 24 and beyond, which is going to go well beyond his tenure. The contracting staff that we have, I said already, around the world, amazing professionals. When we had to bring CVR to, the Department of Defense, did it in 2 weeks. Who does that? 3 million licenses in 2 weeks. Who does that? Oh my goodness. So we know that things can be done fast. When the Roosevelt pulled into Guam, our team in the Pacific, got the circuits out there so that the ship can do what it needed to do in dock. When the Mercy and the Comfort came into New York and California, they needed capability. Our contracting staff made it happen, 48 hours. But all that I just said couldn't be done without, that important teamwork, partnership with our industry partners who actually deliver the capability, right? We have a contracting staff that does great work, but it's the industry that actually executes. And so, my takeaway, after 2.5 years of doing this, is that we need to continue to improve, that relationship. Will never be done. We need to be transparent. I think this forum, we try to be as transparent as we can. Who else, what other major agency will lay out for the next 2 years all our known contract requirements on a single slide, on a single spreadsheet, 270-something line items? Who else does that, So I've learned a lot. I'll be done in 6 months. I think I'll be a part-timer after that, but it's enjoyable. So I thank you all for listening and the great teamwork. So with that, thank you, Doug. Thank you, Jason.
Thank you, sir.
Give our panel members a hand.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. Oh my.
Thank you, gentlemen. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Mike Nichols from the U.S. Space Force to the stage.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Mike Nichols from the Commercial Satellite Communications Office. Today, I'll be providing the forecast to industry for DoD ComSatCom requirements. Before I do want to thank Lieutenant General Skinner, Major General Yee, Mr. Martin, and Mr. Packard for allowing us to participate here today. For those that may not be aware, our office was part of DISA for 20 plus years. Then it was part of the fiscal year 18 NDAA that has moved us over to U.S. Space Force. And I don't know if I have control over the slides. Okay. So as part of that fiscal year 18 NDAA, the sole authority for the procurement of commercial SATCOM for the DoD now resides with the Chief of Space Operations, currently General Raymond. So we execute that mission on his behalf. Our team is a fully staffed team of senior program analysts, acquisition professionals, cybersecurity professionals, customer account managers, and contracting officer representatives. So in total, we have, excuse me, 130 plus contracts supporting DoD commercial SATCOM at any given time. So what I'll show you today is what we have looking forward a year in advance over the course of the next year of those procurements that are upcoming. Next slide, please. We have a key partnership with GSA. So as I step through these, beginning with the next slide, you'll note the identifiers, right? It's part of our partnership we have with GSA, the partnership we still maintain with DITCO, a very close partnership that does the contracting for our office. Excuse me. But as we step through this, you'll notice some of them are identified as CTCs, which are transponded capacity requirements, CSS, which are subscription service requirements, CS3, which are custom solutions, and then if we have requirements, which we do, that don't fall in those types of buckets, we go out with open competition, and that's the SBS. So with that, I have limited time. We'll move on to the next slide. We have 20 open procurements. There's no way I'll be able to get through all 20. But I did highlight a few because I wanted to show, and what I've highlighted kind of covers the gamut of the type of capabilities we're acquiring on behalf of the DoD. What I've highlighted in blue is what I'll concentrate on. So you can see with this first one, this is a mobile satellite service requirement for BGAN services and GX services, okay, L-band and KA-band services. It is a BPA. It's available for all of the DoD to access and acquire these services, and other federal agencies. So you'll note that the RFP is expected to be released in November with an anticipated award date in February and the estimated life cycle value. Next slide, please. Here, again, trying to highlight different things so you can see the scope and the breadth of the capabilities we acquire. CSS 0104 is going to be our global X-band BPA. As many of you know, the military leverages MIL-SATCOM very heavily. That's within X-band, as well as MIL-KA band. But there are commercial X-band capabilities as well. So we're very excited about this global X-band BPA that will allow the DoD and other parties to rapidly, because it's a BPA, acquire commercial X-band services. The RFP is expected to be released in November with an anticipated award in June of next year. Next slide, please. For another capability, KU-band. So we've talked L-band and KA. We've talked X-band. Here's a KU-band requirement. Transponded capacity over the CENTCOM AOR, 144 megahertz of KU-band. RFPs expected to be released in December with a contract award in July. Next slide, please. I didn't highlight either of these. I'll just hold it up here for a second so everyone can review it. I think these should be available to everyone on the website. Additionally, we work with DITCO very closely, and each quarter we release a forecast to industry. So on sam.gov, each quarter you will receive there's a 1-year look out of our acquisition and procurement activities. Next slide, please. This next item I have highlighted, we're very excited about. I think many of you are probably familiar with all of the LEO mania going on with Starlink and OneWeb and the Amazon services, all of the low Earth orbit. So we are putting together a proliferated LEO multi-award IDIQ. We're very excited about that. While the vast preponderance of our acquisition, we work with DITCO, we are part of the Space Force now, and this specific acquisition is being worked by the U.S. Space Force contracting activity out in Los Angeles. The RFP, a draft RFP was just recently released. I think that has since closed. In fact, I know it has. So some of you may have saw the draft RFP. The actual RFP is scheduled for March of 2022, and with an anticipated award date of next summer and August timeframe. Next slide, please. Another capability we're excited about, it gets leveraged currently very heavily, is our MEO capability, right? Our medium Earth orbit BPA. So again, this just shows kind of the breadth of the capabilities we're providing to the DoD, whether it's geostationary orbit, middle Earth orbit, mid-Earth orbit, or low Earth orbit. So we're very excited to keep this opportunity and capability moving forward for the DoD. It's been heavily leveraged. The RFP is expected in April of next year with an anticipated award of September. Next slide, please. I did not highlight anything here. I do know I have a time limit. So again, I have 20. We're happy to speak to these at the table we have set up. Next slide, please. Another capability here for the United States Army. This is a C-band requirement, 20 megahertz of C-band. So again, another opportunity across various bands to meet mission partner requirements. RFP release date expected in May with a contract award next December. Next slide, please. I think this is what all that I have for the presentation, but again, another Army requirement for KU band, and this is across largely the Northcom AOR. RFP is expected to be released in October of 2022. So I hope that this just gives everyone a quick overview of the forecast that we have for industry, the upcoming procurements over the next 12 months. As I indicated, every quarter we go out with an updated roll-up that's always looking 12 months out. You can find that on sam.gov. And if you're not familiar with our office, please stop by so we can meet you. We're happy to talk about any of these opportunities in more depth. And again, thank you for having us here today.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Nichols will now take questions. If you have a question, please submit it to askdissaf2i@mail.mil. Sir, your first question, GSA MAS 517410, will CSCO use the GSA vehicle for the next 5 to 10 or 15 years?
Yes, we certainly expect to. That partnership we've had with GSA has been in place since 2009. We think it's been very successful. We meet with GSA actually on a weekly basis, and then at leadership levels on a quarterly basis or so. So yes, we expect this relationship and the FCSA vehicle to continue. I will tell you, General Raymond's vision is for a SATCOM enterprise architecture. And so we are working with our U.S. Space Force counterparts to get after that enterprise architecture. But with that said, this partnership with GSA will be in place for some time.
Thank you, sir. That is our final question. As a reminder, you can view the slides by scanning the QR code and clicking on the event in the agenda. At this time, our program networking tables are open for industry partners to visit, located at the 300 level Howard Street lobby. They will be available until 3 p.m. Now, please welcome back Mr. Jason Martin, Component Acquisition Executive.
All right. You want me to use this one or this one? This one? Okay. All right. Good morning. So you heard from me a little bit. I'm going to explain a little bit more on how we actively manage programs in the agency and how we're starting to think about things slightly differently. The first thing I want to explain is the director actually gives me acquisition authority through a formal memo process. So he did that when he came in. And then the way it worked, due to all the changes and the acquisition folks that had left, the acquisition certified folks that had left, over time kind of created a very big hole in acquisition. So there was a period when I was actively the MDA for all programs in the agency, which, as you can imagine, is challenging, but it was significant. So I've really tried to prioritize ensuring that the center leaders and the directorate leaders have the resources they need and the authorities they need to operate. The last thing any of them wants to do, and the last thing I want to do, is be a mother may I or a bottleneck to help them get their jobs done. So the past couple months, I've delegated MDA authority down to Dr. Herman for cyber. So any activities going in the cyber development all go through Dr. Herman. And then Mr. Means is the MDA for all things ops. And I'm working now with Mr. Greenwell and Ms. Woods on how we're going to delegate authorities to them so they can effectively operate without having to come through me for things. Certainly slows things down and really isn't necessary. They're very capable, obviously, and superb leaders. I want to make sure they have the tools they need to do their jobs. The other thing that we didn't really talk about, but it's very important, is education. So one of my big initiatives as the CAE has really been to reach out to the PMs to help understand where they are, where their heads are, what they're thinking, what's important to them, and how we can further enable them or push accountability down to them. It's a real challenge, as you know, and when these program managers are given significant amounts of funding and significant mission, we need to make sure we're doing right by them and giving them what they need. So number one, of course, is funding, right? I never get enough money to do what I need to do. And so we talked a little bit about that up here this morning, and I know y'all know that we are operating in a fiscally constrained environment, but do you really know what that means? So I think Doug did a great job talking about are you all bidding the right folks? Are we doing the right mix? Are we doing what we need to do to make sure those contracts are successful? Educationally, it would be incredibly helpful, and I know some of you do this already, probably most of you do, but again, back to the communication, requirements, expectation setting, really work with the PMs and the PM team members to make sure they understand what they need to do to help you as well, right? And so it's more back to that communication, education efforts, et cetera. As you likely know, like other places, we don't have a lot of acquisition certified folks where they need to be. It is a rigorous process. It is a real challenge, and it's really hard to take that time out of your day to do that. So anything we can do to help those program managers with their jobs and help them getting done what they need to do, please do that. And again, that's in the spirit of teamwork and making sure we're delivering for the end user. So what I'm going to do is, we've talked about kind of what CAE is, which is really oversight and governance, and then of course the senior leaders are responsible for executing. When General Skinner came in, as we started doing the DPRs, and like I said, the first one was kind of rough. Well, it was kind of rough because the entire chart was red, and it was all accurate. We didn't have our hands around cost. We certainly didn't understand performance, or wasn't performing the way we should be, and schedule was blown out of the water, right? So our 3 key tenets of acquisition, cost, schedule, performance were all red. But the other thing that the director found interesting as we started to go through, and what I did is actually give him high priority items so he knew the big ticket items, things that he would be surprised with. And after the first couple sessions, he said, Jason, I don't understand what we're doing. I'm hearing about, net management one day, I'm hearing about EMAS the next day, and I'm hearing, about business systems the next day. He said, well, what are we doing from a portfolio perspective? And I said, well, sir, that's a great question. We've tried to do that a few times, which is build portfolios so we can really think about how we're managing things and how we're effectively communicating things. So his request and then Mr. Barnhurst's request for, when we started to relook the organization to become optimal, this is what I came up with my peers, worked through the senior leaders to say, hey, what do you think about this? So we have a very lengthy list, like I said, about 130 programs, and it's broken down by functional areas, owners, directorates at the time, centers at the time. There were only 2, now there's 4, so that changed the dynamics a little bit. But we really came up with, here's what we believe are the portfolios in the agency. And what you won't see today, just because it's a lot of detail, is there are 130 programs behind each one of these little bubbles. That you see on here, these little database looking items. Now, these are what we call programs, right? So it's ACAT 1 through 4, and then those portfolios are comprised of those ACAT 1 through 4 programs or projects. So in the procurement side, there's actually more than 2, but these are some of the bigger contracts we have, acquisition of service contracts, and then also we have JELAs that fall into that space as well. Going up to the next level, and what we did, or what Mr. Barnhurst did as part of his mission analysis group, was really look at what made sense from an organizational perspective on how to manage the portfolios. So I sat down with Chris and said, hey, Chris, what do you think about this? He and I tweaked a few things. But this really, if you look at the core, that really is IE, the IE organization, which is under Mr. Patchkowski. And there's a number of programs which you're all likely very familiar with. Those are longstanding programs that fall into that core space. Compute, I worked with Sharon and team to really identify, what she intends to do next, which I think we're still working on. And I think Sharon's doing a great job bringing the worlds of cloud and the ecosystem together. These are the portfolios as they stand today for both Sharon and Mr. Means, and Admiral Hurley and Mr. Ahmed. So what this is compute, right? So compute across the board spans the agency. But when we think about a portfolio, this is how we think about it. Now, as I mentioned, Sharon's may change slightly based on how she rolls out her strategy. But obviously JSP and 4E&O are in there. And then we actually took GCDS out of the core layer and moved it up to compute just based on mission, which it's bounced around a few times. So when I ran one of the infrastructure organizations, GCDS was under me. So it's moved around a little bit, but we settled in the compute space. And then finally, enterprise services, which are the hot items that we've talked about a lot today. Really think everything collaboration at large, I would say. And you see the program portfolios there as well. for the enterprise services. And then Spectrum is kind of the glue that I see that takes all over, right? We can't communicate without that Spectrum. So the other thing I tried to demonstrate here is there are some programs or organizations or projects that really span everything. So emerging technology, you all have heard Steve Wallace speak a few times about what his roadmap is. I think he's probably going to talk about it. I think he does talk about it today as well. So you'll learn more about that, but that really does look across the entire agency. So what I intend to do with Steve as he brings up his new capabilities and thoughts and we start to bake that into a set of requirements and roll that out, Steve will be on the front end of that from an emerging technology perspective, and then that will help us shape our strategic plans for POM 23, 24, and out. So Steve's fully in charge of that. Cybersecurity, obviously that is Mr. Greenwell and his role as the risk management executive with the agency. But of course, he has to ensure that what we're putting on the network is cyber secure. So that's obviously all encompassing, very critical piece. So you'll see that spans the entire stack of the portfolios. The cyber portfolio does something similar, right? So we protect every aspect of the network. We break it down into endpoint, mid-tier, boundary, and perimeter. And then you see the components within there. Now, those are the portfolios within cyber as well. So that Dr. Herman is now firmly in place leading that organization. That may change, but that's how we had it a couple months ago, and we'll certainly talk to Dr. Herman about how he wants to either reshape or relook his portfolio, but that falls under the cyber portfolio, which spans, again, 3 tiers of the network. And then joint testing, obviously critically important. We found out the hard way what happens when you don't test. I think Don Means and I talk every single day about what we could have done differently. So testing is really something I've also tried to put a focus on and will continue to put a focus on, whether it's inside of industry or with JITC, as JITC falls under my other organizational hat. Now, what's interesting, there are 2 things on here that should be on here that are not. Twofold reason. Number one, when I built the charts, they weren't a thing per se, but they're also very all-encompassing. So what I really could do is take Thunderdome and slap it all around all of this, right? So you don't see Thunderdome on here, but it does fall under Dr. Herman in the cyber portfolio. And then as I mentioned, with cross-functional teams, he will impact really every single portfolio on this chart. And the other thing is identity management, identity credential access management. That also falls under Dr. Herman, excuse me. That is the foundation for Thunderdome. So it's something else that you will see, you will hear about as an enabler, very critical to our success moving forward across the entire portfolio look that I'm showing you here on the screen. So with that said, I really don't have a lot to talk about. Really, this is just to kick off, so I give you a frame of reference when the center level, center and directorate chiefs speak, so you can conceptually in your mind kind of see where they fall into the portfolio look, which is not specifically an organizational look, it's a portfolio look. But just to give you a little extra context as to how we're thinking about things and when we brief the boss on how he sees things. So if you go in pitching a capability, this would really help you, if it's cross-cutting, to be able to say, oh yeah, I think I fall into these 2 or 3 different categories, right? Where in the past you would have said, oh, this will help Mr. Patchkowski. Well, now you're helping potentially a number of centers or a number of directorates, something you may not have thought about before. And certainly when you are supporting enabling capabilities like an ICAM, you're going to span the entire spectrum of our portfolio concept. So with that said, I think I have a couple minutes for questions. And if not, you get a break.
Thank you, Mr. Martin. Again, ladies and gentlemen, if you have a question, please submit it to askdissa.f2i@mail.mil. Your first question is, how does Thunderdome work with the earlier statement, everything starts with requirements, when Thunderdome is being built as you fly it?
Oh, where's Colonel Finch? Colonel Finch is my deputy for acquisition in the Digital Capabilities Center. So Colonel Finch is working with Dr. Landris to do exactly that, is solidify the requirements. So what we've done is worked across the department, as we mentioned earlier, to gather requirements for what we believe the impacted areas should be and will be. And then also, Mr. Barnhurst and Mr. Wallace really are the original drivers of this concept. So we're working with them to identify the various areas that we need to impact and build out, and then we're formally defining those requirements, and then building those into the expectations for what we plant to seed delivered in the future. So, valid point, right? Move with velocity. When you do that, you still have to put the rigor behind it to make sure you're doing the right thing and delivering the right thing. And Colonel Finch and Dr. Landis are really working through that now with our senior leaders across the agency, but also specifically with Mr. Wallace and Mr. Barnhurst.
Thank you, sir. That is all of the questions we have at this time. Please give a round of applause for Mr. Martin. At this time, we will pause for a 15-minute break. As a reminder, we invite our industry partners to visit the program networking tables located in the Howard Street lobby. Please be in your seats by 10 o'clock for Mr. Roger Greenwell's presentation.